The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got. They're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know, these weather people, they get so worked up about the snow, and they love to predict how much snow we're going to get, and it's going to be, oh my God. I think they undersold this. I'm looking out our windows here on Jennifer Street in D.C., in beautiful Friendship Heights, and it looks like Wisconsin Avenue is running okay now. But, man, about 3 hours ago, awful, terrible. And let me say this about other drivers. Not that I'm going to win any driving awards, but when you drive in the snow, you don't want to be driving 50 miles an hour. But you don't want to be driving 10. I mean, come on. You got to be able to get some momentum, get some traction. And you just can't plod along at 10 miles an hour. If you can't drive, get off the road. But the rest of us have places to go. And nowadays with front-wheel drive, and a lot of people have four-wheel drive, you can navigate the snow if you're careful. Don't drive fast. Drive under the speed limit. But my God, 10 miles an hour? You're creating a real hazard there. And some schmagegi on Rockville Pike, which transitions into Wisconsin Avenue, there's a little hill there down around, I think it's one of the private schools is up there. I forget the name of it. But he couldn't get up the hill. I mean, he looked like he was driving like a Toyota or a Honda. They're front-wheel drive. Learn how to drive the car. All right, enough of that. Oh, boy. Some last night, which we're going to get to at 10 o'clock, Robert Griffin III, trying to rewrite history, took off on Jay Gruden. Now, there's been a battle that's been going on for the last few days, really since Monday night, since the Philadelphia Eagles game, where you had Jalen Hurts getting just pummeled by the pass rush there, and Jay Gruden put out, "If I ever put a quarterback through what Philly is putting Jalen through, I apologize. Pick up a blitz!" exclamation mark. And RG3, who never misses anything like this, jumps on, puts up a picture of himself with his glasses halfway down his nose, and it says, "Say what?" And then Jay writes back, "Robert, you weren't prepared?" question mark. And then things have sort of escalated to the point where Griffin said, and this, you're going to hear this, this is unbelievable to me. This is after he was absolutely awful against Tampa in 2014 when he took, I think, 6 sacks. He threw 2 interceptions, including a pick 6, just an awful performance, and said after the game, hey, you know, when Aaron Rodgers doesn't play well, when Peyton Manning doesn't play well, it's because the other guys don't play well around him. And a lot of people heard that. Most people heard it, said, oh, he's throwing his teammates under the bus. So that comment was walked back to Jay Gruden a couple of days later. And Gruden took off on RG3, said, hey, he doesn't even know how to do a 7-step drop. You know, before Robert starts criticizing his teammates, he ought to take a look at himself. And then, you know, Griffin is looking back on that and saying, and this is unbelievable, and you're going to hear this. Griffin says what happened after the game was that Jay Gruden came to him and he said, you need to call out your teammates in the media. I don't believe that for a split second. Not for a split second. But you'll hear this coming up at 10 o'clock, and we will get to that. Continue to pull these terrific interviews that Joe Buck has been doing. Got one with Michael Irvin today. We'll get the highlights of that coming up in about 20 minutes. And also, 50 years ago today, UCLA's 88-game winning streak came to an end. It had lasted 3 years. Bill Walton wasn't far away from completing his college career without a loss. And they fell to Notre Dame on this day in 1974, and it remains one of the most historical and game-changing games in the history of college basketball. And I'll get to why it was so important coming up later this hour. The football watch is what we're all doing now, what's going to happen and who's going to be the coach of the Commanders. That's what everybody wants to know. Ben Johnson seems to be the front runner from the Detroit Lions. His team is still in the playoffs. They've got a game coming up on Sunday against Tampa to attempt to get to the NFC Championship game. So it's possible that he could be tied up for a little while longer, but they've changed the rules on when you can interview candidates. And today, the Commanders are due to interview, may be going on now, who knows, Ben Johnson on a Zoom call. They can only do it on a Zoom call. If the Lions get eliminated on Sunday, they can talk to him in person next week. If not, I guess they would have to wait until after the NFC Championship game. And I guess if he gets to the Super Bowl, he may be worth waiting for. We'll see how many other teams may do that. But that's the situation with a guy that they seem to be intent on getting. Now, they have fulfilled the Rooney Rule. They've talked to African-American candidates. They talked to Raheem Morris yesterday from the Los Angeles Rams. And Morris, one of those guys who was on the staff that RG3 ran out, when we look back on what Mike Shanahan put together for those 4 years he was here in Washington, that may be one of the greatest staffs in the history of the NFL. The assistants are all over the place, and all of them getting consideration for head coaching jobs if they don't have one already, including his son, who may be on his way to taking his team to a second Super Bowl. But Morris got an interview yesterday. They talked to a couple of other. They will talk to a couple other candidates, but they did talk to Dan Quinn, Cowboys defensive coordinator, yesterday. Boy, the bloom has got to be off the rose after what happened to them against the Green Bay Packers. But there are other names that could be under consideration if they can't land Ben Johnson, one of them, and he looks like a good candidate as well, Bobby Slowick, who, by the way, was on the 2013 Redskins staff, and he's the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans, who looked very good last week against what was a really good Cleveland defense throughout the season. Now, Flacco throwing a couple of pick sixes didn't help things, but he looked like he knew what he was doing against a defense which has gotten a lot of accolades this year. So he might be a good candidate as well. But all of them seem to have some type of tie to the Mike Shanahan staff, which makes what RG3 did just even more awful. As for Dallas, which was expected to be open, I don't know how anybody could have watched that game and not come away with the conclusion that Mike McCarthy had to go. But the other day, Jerry Jones said, nope, Mike McCarthy is going to stay. Peter King of NBC, reaction to that with Dan Patrick yesterday.
If you've won 36 regular season games in 3 years, I think you have a great argument to stay regardless of what happens in the postseason. But, Dan, look at 3 years in a row how their season has ended. It crashed and burned in Dallas against the 49ers 2 years ago when Dak and McCarthy screwed up the clock at the end of the game. It crashed and burned in an ugly loss at San Francisco, which they couldn't do anything on offense. And then, look at what happened in San Francisco this year. They lose 42-10. So you win 12 games, but does anybody really feel at the end of this season, however you feel about how they were just absolutely manhandled by the 7th seed in the NFC, whatever you feel, does anybody feel they're close to the 49ers? I don't. So I don't know. To me, I thought Jerry Jones was going to look at this and say, we need shock therapy. We're a good team, but we're not going to win with this current administration. But Jerry decided otherwise.
Yeah, trying to figure that out. The 12 wins is great. And they could have 12 wins next year. But it doesn't mean anything unless you do something in the postseason. You could win 9 games and go to the Super Bowl. But, hey, we got 12 wins. Okay, how dangerous are you when you get to the postseason? And you lose at home, and you lose to one of the youngest teams that we've had in recent history, and a quarterback making his postseason debut. And you were never in that game. I mean,
crazy thing is, Dan, to me, when I think about that game, I just think that had to be one of the most embarrassing games that Dan Quinn has ever run a defense for. And, you look at the end of this season, I think the last, 8 or 9 games, I figured it out the other day, They've allowed 25 points a game and 353 yards.
Yeah.
This is not, I mean, it was a shocking development, no question, but that Cowboys defense has looked like the Eagles defense over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And I don't know what that means, really. I just know that, just the same way I was shocked that Jonathan Gannon got the job in Arizona last year, coming off a game in which his defense gave up 2 of the softest touchdowns in Super Bowl history, to lose the Super Bowl. And then 3 days later, he's being introduced as the coach of the Cardinals. And again, look, Jonathan Gannon's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. So maybe it shouldn't matter. Dan Quinn's a good coach. Maybe it shouldn't matter. I can't figure out how you pull an absolute no-show in that game, and that's what the Dallas defense did.
Now, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Dan Quinn, and that's Peter King, by the way, with Dan Patrick. It'd be interesting if Dan Quinn doesn't get a head coaching job. Does he go back to the Cowboys, and do they run it back with the same duo of McCarthy and Quinn? McCarthy's the offensive coordinator, really, and then Quinn is the defensive coordinator. Do you run it back after what happened in the Green Bay game and really expect a good response from the team on that? I don't know. I think Quinn, I guess he can't go if he doesn't get a head coaching job. But I wonder if you just make a change just to make a change off that game. Maybe you don't overreact to one game, but, boy, that was really awful for the Cowboys. Now, that means with the Dallas job not opening up, Bill Belichick ain't going there. He's not going there. And the latest is that he's closing in on the Falcons job. He's already had a couple of interviews there. This is Albert Breer, also on with Dan yesterday, and his look on what's going to happen between Belichick and the Falcons.
There are some connections between Arthur Blank and Bill, and like they had Thomas Dimitroff there for 12 years, 13 years, I think, actually, and like Scott Pioli was there for a time. So, Arthur Blank has seen the Patriot vernacular, and it's actually worked for him in the past, and that's given him a way of back channeling to Belichick over the last few weeks. And then I think the other piece of it, like that, I just think it's like a different type of hire than Blank's ever made before. Like if you look back at his 25 years as owner, he had Jim Moore, rising young assistant, probably Vitrino college coach, Mike Smith, like an experienced assistant, but never seen as a head coach. That worked out pretty well. And then Dan Quinn and Arthur Smith as rising young assistant. So this will be totally different, but he's 81 years old, and I think he thinks he's got a team that's right on the precipice if they can get the quarterback position worked out to compete in the here and now. And so it would make sense if he would act with urgency right now, which I think is part of why he fired Arthur Smith as quickly as he did, and why they moved to go and bring Belichick in as quick as they did. I think a lot of it's going to come down, similar to like Harbaugh with the Chargers. I think a lot of it will come down to the infrastructure there, and if Bill thinks that he can set it up the way that he wants to set it up.
And the main thing, and that's Albert Breer with Dan Patrick, the main thing that Belichick has to have is a quarterback, obviously. They don't have one there. The Taylor Heineke finished up the season for the Falcons. They're looking for a quarterback. Well, it's a quarterback who's a free agent, and he's been around the league a while, not as long as Belichick, but around the league, and that's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins recently said he'd be willing to take a hometown discount to play with the Vikings next year, and that ultimately may be what happens. But in a conversation yesterday on CBS Sports, Cousins was asked about the Belichick move going to the Falcons, and Cousins' wife is from Atlanta. I don't know how much of a factor that's going to be, but she's from there. And so the question was, what about Bill Belichick, and could you play for him? Interesting. This was the response yesterday from Cousins.
Yeah, great respect for him as a coach, like everyone else in pro football. I mean, if you go to that many Super Bowls, win that many Super Bowls, go to that many conference championship games, have the defensive production that he's had for years and years, it says it all. And we played him last year on Thanksgiving night, and once again, I noticed several times what he did coverage-wise was challenging, and it was different. And you always know when you play him that you're kind of looking over your shoulder, wondering if what you're seeing is correct, because he usually is going to break the mold and do something different. And that's part of what has made him a great coach.
Would you ever play for him if you got a chance?
I'm not going to turn down an opportunity to play with a future Hall of Fame coach, but we'll have to see where March leads. It's just a lot of unknowns right now.
So maybe he gets his ring with Belichick. Who knows? But yeah, that's two guys looking for another stop. And I don't know if Cousins is Belichick's kind of guy, but he does like a very cerebral quarterback. And Kirk is that. He does throw some soul-crushing interceptions at the end of games, but he can step in and learn the offense pretty quick. So that'd be one to keep an eye on. Last thing on the Commanders search is, again, they do the Zoom call with Ben Johnson today. This is Peter King on with Dan yesterday, and what his thoughts are on Ben Johnson possibly becoming head coach of the Commanders.
You see what he's done with Jared Goff. He's done a fantastic job with Goff. Goff was so tremendous the other night. I was in the building, and I'll just tell you this. There was a tenseness at the start of that game. There was that place. I wrote it in my column. At one point, they have one of those decibel meters, and the decibel meter was at 118. I mean, that's louder than Seattle, or maybe just as loud. Now, it's a dome, but that is the same noise that you hear if you were standing, which we would never do, if you're standing on the runway and a 737 is taking off and you're right there as it passes by. That's what the noise was. And it never stopped. Dan Quinn told me 75 minutes before the game, the hair on the back of his neck is standing up because he's never been in an environment like that at that point before the game. But I think Ben Johnson would be a really good candidate. They're going to take a quarterback number 2, almost certainly. So let Ben Johnson work with, one of those guys, Drake May, Penix, Caleb Williams, whatever happens. And that's what I would do if I were them.
He said Dan Quinn. He meant to say Dan Campbell, the coach of the Lions, who has done a remarkable job. Got to say, I was very, very wrong on that one. All right, coming up, Michael Irvin and his conversation with Joe Buck. Very, very interesting story. The 15th of 17 kids, and made it all the way to the Hall of Fame as the playmaker for the Dallas Cowboys on their 3 Super Bowl championship teams under the ownership of Jerry Jones. We'll get to that, plus his incredible story of the White House, where he and teammates engaged in, as he said, it's not like a brothel. It was a brothel. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, Ravens preview, 10:30. Ravens with their divisional playoff game tomorrow against the Houston Texans. Kickoff 4:30, coverage here at 4 o'clock. If they win that game, they would host the winner of the Kansas City and Buffalo game, which promises, I think, to be the game of the weekend. That's the late game on Sunday, and they would play at M&T Bank Stadium the following Sunday if the Ravens win. If the Ravens win, they would host the winner of that game. So that's a really cool thing, and we'll be previewing the game coming up with Kyle J. Andrews of Baltimore Sports and Life at 10:30, and also comments from John Harbaugh and Mark Andrews, who's been out for 2 months with an ankle injury but could be ready to return tomorrow. All right, Michael Irvin, one of the many interview subjects that Joe Buck did 6 or 7 years ago, and what an incredible story he is. He is the 15th of 17 children, and he made it to the NFL and became a Hall of Fame wide receiver, the playmaker. I think one of the most intense football players we've ever seen, and he has segued into broadcasting. Now, he's had his bumps along the way, allegations of various things, and he's gotten in trouble many times, but he still floats along and is still on television. This is Irvin about growing up in a family that had 17 kids, and he was number 15.
My mom always made me feel like there was something special about me. Now, she said to me early on, and she said it all of my life, she said, baby, when I got pregnant with you, I was crying. I said, you that happy, baby? She said, oh, no. No, I was saying, God, I can't take another kid. It's what she was saying, and she said, she's primitive Baptist. So she said, I was in church, baby, and God wrapped his arm around my womb and said, Pearl, this will be the one. This is the one. This kid will be blessed among all your kids. She's told me this every day of my life, that you're going to do something special. God has his hands on you. God has you on a short leash, Michael. You're not going to be able to get away with things like everybody else. God has, and I ain't lying, I've gotten in trouble at every turn, anything I try. You know, we're out throwing rocks with all the kids. The glass break, bling, bling, bling. We don't know who broke that glass, but they all knocked on my door. And she said, baby, I told you God has his hand on you. But she told me early on that I was going to do something special. And God told her that I was the kid that will make her latter days greater than her former days.
And as a matter of fact, he was able to buy her a house, still refers to her as baby. He's a great high school football player, and then has the opportunity to go to the University of Miami and play for Jimmy Johnson, before Jimmy Johnson is Jimmy Johnson, before he's won his national championship at the U, and, of course, before he goes on to win 2 Super Bowls with the Cowboys. But it didn't start off smoothly for Irvin at the U, but things got moved along thanks to some help from Jimmy. Here's the story.
My first day, I'm just a freshman. I get into it at the training table. First of all, I'd never seen this kind of food before, you know, at the meal table. And we had this big offensive lineman. And this dude just bullied everybody, right? And the freshmen have to eat last. So we're all in line, and I'm just waiting. And they're just standing there talking, just having a conversation. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get that steak right there. I saw the steak. That's gonna be mine right there. I'm waiting on it. So they're talking. I stepped around them. I said, I'll take that steak right there. He said, hey, Rook, freshman, what you doing, freshman? Get your butt in back. I said, oh, no problem. I get it back, no problem. And then he started talking again. So I said, oh, they started talking. And then they finally went, and this joker went and ordered and said, I'll take that steak. The same steak I wanted. Oh man, all the ghetto came out of me. You know, I took the tray, smashed it across his head. He fell. I hit him and started punching him. They picked me up and they took me to Coach Johnson's office. Now, I'm a freshman, just got there. I got to fight the first day. I'm sitting in Coach's office. Coach like, son, are you okay? I said, yeah, Coach, I ain't got time. I ain't come out here for all this, man. I came here, I got to take care of my mom and everything. He said, son, that's a pretty good right hand you got there, you know? So I found out he's a huge boxing fan. He said, you ever thought about boxing? I was like, I said, what are you? I'm thinking he's going to
suspend you.
I'm thinking he's going to get rid of me and suspend me. He ultimately ends up suspending the senior, and he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, I know you've gone through a lot. He says, I'm going to tell you this now. I'll be here. I'm not leaving you. I'll be here as long as you are here. He said, I just want you to focus on what you came here to do and not get caught up in all of this. And that meant the world to me, because I thought he was going to get rid of me, and he didn't get rid of me, but he kind of gave me that I'm going to be your father thing. And I needed that. And Jimmy and I became very, very close.
Yeah, in many ways a surrogate father. His father, Irvin's father, had died when he was going into his senior year of high school and actually wanted to quit football to help his mom out and make money. And she said, no, you stay with the football. We'll figure it out. And obviously things worked out. Now he has a great career at the U, plays 3 years, wins a national championship there, and then is coming out for the draft, but he wants to finagle things a little bit. Now, keep in mind, this is 1988. This is a year before Jimmy Johnson goes to Dallas and joins Jerry Jones. This was a full year before that. So here's the story of Michael Irvin leaving the U after 3 years to get drafted by the Cowboys, number 11 overall in 1988, and how that all happened. Here we go.
Yeah, back then, you had to graduate early to leave early. And I was trying to get to the league to take care of my mom. So that's why I went all to summer school, and I graduated early. And then I applied for the NFL. But I had to talk to Coach first. And at that time, if some team drafted me that I didn't want to go to, since I was officially a junior and graduating, I could really say no to the team. Because if the team drafted me and I didn't want to play for them, I could drop a class, they would lose the draft choice, I would have to pick up a summer class, graduate, and then apply for what they call a supplemental draft. So here I am, the brokest dude in the world, and I'm trying to position myself to negotiate in my first contract with the NFL so I could get to where I wanted to. And so I would talk to Coach. Coach said, now listen, I'll never forget Jimmy saying to me, he said, I know what you're trying to do. He said, I know what you're trying to do. And he said, I don't mind what you're trying to do. He says, but if Dallas draft you, none of that shenanigans, none of that, you know. And he told me then, he said, I got a Warrior buddy of mine who might be buying the Dallas Cowboys.
He knew prior.
Yes.
That it was a
prior
possibility.
To me getting drafted.
Wow, that Jerry could be the owner.
Jerry was looking into buying the Dallas Cowboys.
And if Jerry's the owner,
right.
Jimmy's
he was
the
coming
next
as
step.
the coach. Right. He was coming in as coach. So Green Bay called, and I was on the phone. Green Bay, Michael, we're thinking about drafting. I was like, Green Bay, like, you know, I'm from Florida. Green Bay, you know, like, whoa, you know. And my whole house started, no way, Green Bay. No, I'm like,
oh my God.
No, right? I'm looking around like, we the poorest people in the world. And we talk about no way, Green Bay. And I actually said no to Green Bay. And then Dallas just drafted me. They never even called. You know, they never even called. They just drafted me. But I was happy. My dad was such a huge Cowboy fan. So I was always happy. Oh, man, he's a huge Cowboy fan. He wore a fedora hat, and we watched Tom Landry all the time. And my dad would always say, if you ever play from Dallas Cowboys, boy, it'd be something, boy. I mean, he loved the Dallas Cowboys. And to actually get drafted by Dallas, it was like, wow.
Yeah, now he was hurt his rookie year, and the coach was still Tom Landry. They were a terrible team. They won 3 games. And Jimmy was right. A year later, Jerry buys the team. He brings Jimmy with him. So for Irvin's second year, he's reunited with Jimmy Johnson, and it works out, obviously, fabulously. They win 2 Super Bowls in those 5 seasons that Jimmy is in Dallas. And then Jimmy leaves. Now, you know, this is Michael Irvin, who has now played since high school for 2 coaches. He played 3 years of college for Jimmy and played 1 year for Tom Landry. And now he's going to get, well, it's only, 2 coaches over that period of time between college and the pros. The other one was Landry and then Jimmy for 5 years. And then Jimmy's leaving. And this is Urban looking back on what all went down in that early part of 1994.
Troy says, Emmett has said, there's no telling how many we could have won had Jimmy stayed there. How do you feel about that?
Exactly the same way. And, you know, we talk about it all the time. We could have won 5 or 6 Super Bowls. We really believe that. I think that, you know, and it was so hard. It was hard for me because, remember, Jimmy was my guy in college and then here in the NFL. And how do you send a car to the shop when it's the best driving car on the lot? What did we need to fix here? How did this happen? So we were all stunned. We were all stunned.
Were you mad or disappointed at Jimmy?
You know, I was probably more upset at Jerry for allowing it to happen than Jimmy. You know, because you understand, I understood the business side of it. And I remember even when the people would come in trying to get interviews, I mean, I was off the chain. I was throwing garbage cans at the people. They would come in trying to get out of this locker room and throwing garbage cans. And I was just so upset that Jimmy was not there. All along, when this thing was brewing, I never thought it would get to this.
You never thought it could happen?
No way you're getting rid of the guy that comes off for winning back-to-back Super Bowls. There's no way that's going to happen. And then it did.
Why do you think he left? Why do you think Jerry pushed?
I don't know. I knew that it was some stuff going on because Jimmy wanted to run such a tight ship. Jerry wanted to make football bigger than life, which is what he's basically done. You know what I mean? He wanted to make big ball.
That.
You cannot argue that. And he wanted to bring in princes and everything. Jimmy wanted that locker room door closed, especially if we lost. He was not in any mood to let Jerry bring all these people around. And I think that was what started it. You know, Jerry couldn't play with his team. Jimmy wouldn't allow it. And Jerry, I guess, just got tired of it.
Well, Jerry still wants to play with his team, it looks like. Rather than possibly hire Bill Belichick, he's hanging on to Mike McCarthy. But that's the first parts of the interview that Irvin did with Joe Buck. Now, the last part that I'm going to play here, and you really can't tell the Michael Irvin story without telling the story of the White House. The Redskins famously had a shed in the back of the practice field that they would gather in after the line would. The Hogs would go there, and they'd gather there. They called it the 5 o'clock club. And not a good idea, drink a bunch of beers and then get on the road. But, in those days, people were not as focused on drinking and driving. Not that it was right, but it was actually started by Vince Lombardi. He wanted his players to have camaraderie. So he encouraged them in 1969 to get together for a couple of beers after practice. And that ultimately led to the 5 o'clock club, which was linemen, and they would let selected people in, like John Riggins. Joe Theismann wanted to get in, couldn't get in. So that was their version of hijinks. Cowboys, after Jimmy Johnson left and Barry Switzer, loosey-goosey gunslinger slicker, Switzer comes in, he's lax. And so things escalate to the point where Irvin actually bought a house right near the practice field, and it was, well, there were things that were going on there, which he's going to get to here. So this is Joe Buck about the post-Jimmy years with Barry Switzer and the famous White House near the Cowboys practice field.
Troy says, Emmett has said, there's no telling how many we could have won.
Oop, hit the wrong one. This is the one. Here it is, the house that was behind the practice field.
I guess the question would be, how bad did the culture of misbehaving get?
Jimmy kept a tight rein on all of us, even through the off season. All of those off season workouts, they were voluntary, mandatory. So they're voluntary, but you better be here. That kind of a thing, or you may not be here. So when we lost that, then things did get, they just got a little bit. They got out of hand. They just got out of hand. And imagine that now we're the toast of the town, and everybody partaked in being the toast of the town.
I mean, back in Dallas, you had the White House, which is, kind of like basically a brothel, if nothing else.
Yeah, and basically, that's what it was. And that's what we did, and we did have an extra house, and after just thinking I didn't want to go to hotels and all the problems that caused, so we thought, or I thought, that maybe I should get some guys together and we just buy an extra house. And we did. We had an extra house. It was right around the corner. I mean, you go in the backyard and you can see the practice field. So, we practiced right there.
Which means you could be on the practice field and see the White House.
All the time, right. So it worked both ways, right? Yeah. So
what happened when Jerry found out about this?
Oh, my God. I'll tell you how Jerry found out. The story was breaking about this White House. And I remember Leon Lett called me a couple weeks before and said, hey, man, I think we've been infiltrated. You need to shut down the White House. And I said to Leon, this is not a movie. This is not a movie. I said, we're not shutting down the White House. This is not the movie, man. Get out of here with that. And then a couple weeks later, boom, live on the news. And so Jerry, I was in meetings, and Jerry called me. He called me out of the meetings in his office. He said that the story's breaking about this extra house you guys have right around the corner here. He said, Michael, all I need is the truth out of you, and I'm going to fight with you. But you got to tell me the truth. And I thought long and hard. I was like, wow, man, they done found out about the White House. And I said to him, I said, boss, I was trying to do the wrong thing the right way.
That's genius. That is genius.
That was actually my answer to him, man. He was like, he just kind of shook his head like, what do I say if you answer it like that?
What could he say?
Yeah, but he could have said, what were you thinking about, Because all of us was hanging out there, and the girls were there too, so, yeah.
You get arrested in the offseason, suspended that next year for 5 games. What was going on in your life?
Just everything. Enjoying success, enjoying all that it brings, and it brought a whole lot of things. And I had this thing, that I would always, in the off season, go out from, they'll say get away from football after the season's over, I'm going out and hanging out, chasing, drinking, getting high, hanging out with friends, chasing women and everything. And then March 5th is my birthday, and so I have one big party, hang out, have fun, and then that's it. I'm starting back training, and then I didn't do anything. I was just training football, and I would do this every year. And this year, on that birthday party, so we go to a hotel room, I got some girls, and we have drugs and everything, and we're in there, and the police came in, and they found us in there, found the girls, and they found drugs, and yeah.
When you were on trial in the courtroom, I know one guy who showed up and was there as a teammate on your side, in your corner, and that was?
That was Troy Aikman, the only guy to show up now, and I didn't want him to show up.
Because now he's got to answer questions, and he's going to have microphones in his face.
And everybody be dealing with it, and he was a great guy, and he'll have to deal with it, and it's Troy, I don't want anybody showing up. But there's nothing, nothing meant more to me than seeing him there. It meant everything to me that he did show up.
He said, I'll tell you about Michael Irvin. Not only did I, meaning Troy, show up there, but I leave the courthouse, I go back to the facility, I'm in there in my locker, messing around, whatever, might have lifted weights, whatever he was doing, and he said he heard something on the practice field. And he left the locker room, he went out to the practice field, and there you were in the midst of this trial, and you're out there running sprints, you're out there running pass patterns, and he said the most unbelievable thing, he was out there pantomiming his touchdown celebration in the midst of all that. He goes, that is Michael Irvin to a T. Despite all that, he was out there working on his craft.
My craft is my escape. You know what I mean? The game was my escape, and honestly, Joe, that's why I love Jerry, because Jerry, he knows a lot of the people that he get in this league, and where they come from and some of the issues that they may have gone through growing up, that maybe they'll have some issues. And he uses the game to kind of save their lives, because the game saved my life. There's no doubt in my mind, without football, this would have been a whole different life for me.
Yeah, Michael Irvin, the 15th of 17 kids in a poor family without football, and his what is it? Proclivity, is that the right word? His unbelievable ability, I guess, to get himself into trouble would have led him into much more trouble than he got into. He still got into it as a player, but remarkable story. His because of the White House and some of the other stuff, he had to wait to get in the Hall of Fame. It wasn't in his first year of eligibility that he got in, but he was crying, very emotional. He wears all of his emotions on his sleeve. And, when you hear him in this kind of a forum, I think it's so much better than what he is on TV, because he's a little bit too manic. And in a sit-down conversation like this, you find out, A, how bright he is, B, how well he tells the story, and C, if he were to polish up his broadcasting a little bit, I think he could go even further than he has. Now, he's gotten himself in plenty of trouble, and recently, too. I think there was an incident, I think it was last Super Bowl, where he was accused of sexual harassment, and I guess the charges were dropped. He was initially suspended by the NFL Network and then put back, I believe, but man, he is just an interesting guy to listen to, and does tell a story very, very well. Stay with us. I want to talk about what RG3 is yapping about. We'll get to that, plus Ravens preview. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Hi, we got Ravens preview this hour. Tony's got a show coming up at 11 o'clock, and I want to unpack what's going on here between Robert Griffin III and Jay Gruden. Things have escalated quite a bit in the last 12 hours or so. And, let's start with the history of this. And it goes back to the 2014 season when Robert Griffin III, after chasing the Shanahan crew out of town, and by the way, look at all the coaches who come from that group of coaches who are here in 2013 and who are continuing to get interviews for head coaching jobs if they don't already have one, like Raheem Morris, who interviewed here yesterday.
Bobby Slowick, who could be on the radar if they don't get Ben Johnson, was here on that 2013 staff. You got, 3 or 4 other coaches around the league who are former assistants of Mike Shanahan. And RG3 went to Dan Snyder. No, got to go. All these guys got to go. Got to get me another coach. So they bring in Jay Gruden in 2014. And Jay Gruden, in his introductory news conference, I think it was that, or it might have been an interview a short time later, but it was right about the time he was hired, said it would be crazy to turn Robert Griffin III into a drop-back passer. That's just not who he is. And then, like a week later, he gave an interview to Peter King, then of SI, and he said, oh, no, if you can't be a drop-back passer in this league, you really can't play quarterback, because somebody had gotten to him, and probably the RG3 family with the dad maybe, and said, no. Said, you're going to make him into a drop-back passer. The father once said, show me a running quarterback, I'll show you a loser. Well, he obviously hasn't watched modern football, because there's a guy named Patrick Mahomes who's already won a couple of Super Bowls and could win a few more, and he seems to be able to move. Josh Allen, who they'll play on Sunday night, he can run too. I mean, nowadays you can't run, you can't play. And so it was the charge then, I guess, of Jay Gruden to turn him into a drop-back passer. Well, he wasn't, and he was terrible. And he wanted to be Aaron Rodgers instantly when he didn't know the offense. And he was so bad in a game. Now, remember, he starts the season, I think they played Houston in Jay's first game, and lackluster. Like, he produced a couple of field goals. He wasn't much of anything. They come home for the home opener. They play Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a bad team, but early in the game, RG3 goes down with a dislocated ankle. And the question was it just dislocated, or was it dislocated and broken? If it was both, he was going to be out for the year. And Jay, in his post-game news conference with Sonny and then Sam, said it sounded to him like he'd gotten word that RG3 was going to be out for the year, and sounded just a little bit giddy about that, because clearly he had had enough at that point. He even said during the preseason when he watched RG3 play in Baltimore, he said, we may have to win some games like 10-7 this year. Like, he knew this was going to be a disaster. So RG3 is out. Kirk Cousins comes in. He does have to bench Kirk Cousins because Kirk throws a lot of interceptions. But he goes to Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy has the game of his life on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys, and RG3 turned out did not have a broken ankle, so he was ready to come back, and he's champing at the bit to come back, and he wants, with the support of the owner, to come and play in the Dallas game, and fortunately, he was not picked to play. Well, off the Dallas game, you figured that Kirk deserves another start. Nope, it's Robert next week against Minnesota, and I'm sure a lot of players in the locker room went, really? Okay, you're going to do that. Plays a couple more games, isn't very good, and then he plays in the middle of the year the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. Robert Griffin in that game was horrendous. Okay, he was sacked 6 times in that game. He threw 6 sacks. He threw 2 interceptions, one of them a pick 6, and the Redskins lost the game 27-7. Chris Cooley, who had recently retired, he had played on that 2012 team with RG3, but was retired now doing radio, used to do a film analysis of every game, and he would grade the top players. He said, I can't give the quarterback a grade here because the performance was so bad. The performance was that bad in that 27-7 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he did throw for some garbage yards because they were way behind, but 23 of 32, 207 yards and a touchdown, but sacked 6 times and the 2 interceptions. So after the game, and somebody sent me the exchange that took place. Okay, so after the game, Griffin is talking to the media about this horrendous performance, and he said, quote, "It doesn't take one guy that's proven. If you want to look at the good teams in this league and the great quarterbacks, the Peytons, the Aaron Rodgers, those guys don't play well. If their guys don't play well, they don't. We need everybody. I need every one of those guys in that locker room, and I know they're looking at me saying the same thing." So on Monday, day later, that is walked back to Jay Gruden, that comment. And was asked, do you have any response to what Robert said yesterday? And this is what Jay said. Robert had some fundamental flaws. His footwork was below average. He took 3-step drops when he should have taken 5. He took a 1-step drop when he should have taken 3 on a couple of occasions. That can't happen. He stepped up when he didn't have to step up and stepped into pressure. He read the wrong side of the field a couple of times. So his basic performance, just critiquing Robert, it was not even close to being good enough to what we expect from the quarterback position. Okay, so he lit him up publicly. Let me just, before we play the Robert Griffin rant that went on last night, and the setup for that, by the way, is that during the Philadelphia game, Jay Gruden put out a tweet which said, if I left my quarterback, I'm paraphrasing here, if I left my quarterback unprotected like that, I apologize, pick up a blitz. And Robert responded with his glasses halfway down his nose, and he put up a picture and said, say what? And so then Jay responded with, Robert, you weren't prepared? And Griffin responded, he said, well, you said you never coached a quarterback like me who could run and pass like that. Okay, so last night, and I guess this is what really touched a nerve, Gruden put up video of Griffin once again looking for the spotlight, always making it about himself while they're doing one of their Monday Night Countdown shows in Seattle. He's in his shirt and his tie, and I guess he's got his sneakers on, and he wants to show everybody how fast he is, so he runs a sprint on the field, and there just happens to be a pigeon that's like trailing him. And so Jay posted the video and said, go race a pigeon. Well, that must have really struck a nerve because Griffin took off on him. Let me again read what Griffin said after this performance against Tampa during the 2014 season. It doesn't take one guy, and that's proven. If you want to look at the good teams in this league and the great quarterbacks, the Peytons and the Aaron Rodgers, those guys don't play well if their guys don't play well. They don't. We need everybody. I need every one of those guys in that locker room, and I know they're looking at me saying the same thing. So with that background, here is Robert Griffin III on his podcast last night, and this bit of audio that he posted on his Twitter account.
If Jay Gruden really wants to talk, I'm not going to cuss the man out. I'm not going to call him outside of his name. But what I am going to do is tell you guys the truth. And the truth of the matter is there was a moment in D.C. that is vividly remembered. Jay Gruden went to a press conference and he undressed me at that press conference in a way that a coach should never undress his starting quarterback. It was after a game, and I said in the press conference that the best players in the NFL have the guys around them play at an extremely high level. No one is out there doing it on their own. Now, the media pundits and everyone took that and said RG3 threw his teammates under the bus. And I had to eat that for a long time because Jay didn't back me in the media the next day. He doubled down on it and actually picked me apart in the media. But what people don't know is that the only reason I went to that press conference and said what I said to challenge my teammates through that press conference was because Jay Gruden asked me to do that. What hurt me about that was the fact that after I did that in the press conference, not only did Jay Gruden not have my back, but he actually burned me with it. He came out the next day and burned me in the media. He came out the next day in a meeting in our team meeting room and burned me in front of my own teammates. Took accountability for what I said. It was taken out of context and apologized to my teammates in the front of that team meeting. Now, Jay, knowing that he had asked me to do that and still went to the media and tore me down to the media, even in that room, it's the fact that he has zero self-awareness and zero integrity. Because even though he asked me to do something, he didn't have the balls to have my back.
Okay. That's Robert Griffin III's version of what happened there. There's no way to know what he's saying, the exchange that he had with Jay Gruden, whether that's true or not, because that's a he said, unless there's audio of this and unless there's a witness, and I don't think there was. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I don't believe that after that game, Jay Gruden went to Robert Griffin III and said, you need to call out your teammates in the media. That's insane. Anybody who's played on a team anywhere wouldn't do that. That didn't happen. That could not have happened. Did not. And the way he couched his recall of what he said to the media, He was comparing himself, it sounded like, to Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning. Like, I'm just as good as they are, but they got better teammates around me. That's what it sounded like, throwing the team under the bus. So after the video came out, Gruden put out, "You really want to play this game?" And Griffin responded, "I'm not playing any games. I'm retired. You have a free invite to come on the show and discuss face to face. I know where all your bodies are buried, Jay. Don't play with me." All right. Before we get to the idea of Jay Gruden going on his show, let me just attack this line that he has. "I'm retired. I'm retired." Okay. Griffin will tell anybody that wants to listen he can still play. And this was about a month ago when Griffin was on the Dan Patrick show, and this exchange took place.
I personally have not reached out to a team to say, yeah.
Has a representative reached out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, representatives reach out all the time. You know,
but they have to have your approval.
No, they don't. No, they don't. If you have an agent, and someone's reaching out to teams on your behalf, they don't ask you if they can reach out to that team. They just reach out to the team. So what I'll say is what I have done is I have publicly stated that I can play. I'm willing and able to play. I want to play. And if a team just so happens to call my number, I'm ready to play. I have said that. I said the Browns should have signed me. I thought they should have. Okay. They did.
I want to play. I can play. And then he says, "I'm retired." Well, which is it? Which is it, Robert? And as far as the invite to come on the show, if you listen to that audio from Griffin, the part that he played on Twitter, that's heavily edited. So it's a no-win for Jay to go on his show, and whatever they put out afterwards would be an edited version. I would be very interested in hearing a live conversation between the two of them. And yes, there are bodies buried, but they're bodies buried on both sides. Will Compton, and I haven't seen this. Rex, you saw this on Twitter, right? Will Compton put out, he does his own podcast, and I'm hesitant to play it live because I think he drops a lot of F-bombs when he talks. But what was his takeaway from what he saw?
He kind of tried to play the fence. He, like you just said, he said bodies buried on both sides. Mm-hmm. He said the team meeting did happen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you could kind of tell he didn't want to. Yeah. He didn't want to pick a side.
And I don't know if that's unusual for in a team meeting that a quarterback is criticized by a coach. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about it. I'd have to ask other players. But this is what Griffin put out. He ran to respond to what Compton put out. "Thanks for confirming the truth. Whole situation sucked. Just want to clear up one thing. The reason it didn't work out for your boy in Washington was because of my health. That's all. These truths coming out now just illustrate things my teammates in the media didn't know 10 years ago." Well, again, you had your injury and you made a video with the sponsorship of Gatorade all in for week one. Claimed that you were healthy and then played the 2013 season. There has never been a time until now where you're blaming your failure on injury. And whatever Will Compton said, and I'm anxious to hear the whole thing, I don't think there was confirmation there that there was a conversation where the coach of the team told the quarterback, "Go throw your teammates under the bus. Call them out in the media." Now, Jimmy Johnson used to do this when he was head coach of the Cowboys. Okay, it's not unusual for a coach to do this. But there's no way that a coach would tell the starting quarterback of the team, "Go criticize your teammates in the media. Go make them accountable." That's nonsense. That's complete nonsense. And what is it, Robert? You say to Jay, "You're retired," but you say to everybody else, "Oh, I can still play, and I got 6 or 7 years left to play football." What is it? And I would say to him, if you are retired, and the league has pretty much decided you're retiring, because whatever this nonsense is that you're telling Patrick, that you've got people calling on your behalf, and that might be the case. There might be some people who act as, quasi, "Hey, Robert, if I can get you the job, will you give me 3% or however it works for agents?" Maybe there's that. But if there is interest in Griffin, I don't think he can take it, because here's what usually happens in these situations. When a team needs a quarterback, what they'll do on a Tuesday is bring in 4 or 5 guys for a tryout. there are plenty of these quarterbacks who've been in the league, have had experience, and can step in an emergency situation. They bring him in for a tryout. Griffin couldn't show up at one of those tryouts and not get a job. That just wouldn't work for his ego. So, but to just try and rewrite history in that way, to say what he said about the way he said it, and again to say, all I said is, we got to have some help from the team. You were terrible. You were terrible that day. Terrible. Awful. And eventually you were benched again. They benched him again for Colt McCoy, and then McCoy got hurt, and Griffin played the last couple of games, and finally he was benched for good in the 2015 preseason when he looked absolutely lost in a game against Cleveland. So, man, I hate liars. I really do. And there's no way to prove that that's a lie, I guess. No way to prove that. But the notion that a coach would say to a quarterback after the quarterback has crapped the bed on the field, has been absolutely terrible, sacked 6 times, 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 in a lopsided loss to a team that wasn't very good, Tampa Bay. And then you go to the quarterback and you say, yeah, you need to call out your teammates in the media. That didn't happen.
Also, what coach would say, you know what, you're just too good at throwing and running. I don't know how to coach you.
I didn't think he really said it that way. He just sort of.
You don't know how to coach a guy that can throw and run like me?
I think it was more like, Griffin was saying, well, you weren't really qualified to coach me since you didn't coach anybody like me before. And there really wasn't anybody like him. Good for the Shanahans for finding an offense that fit him. And as Mike Shanahan said when he was drafted, he said it was going to take some time. We were going to have to come up with something that fit what he was doing while he learned how to be a drop-back passer. He said he never had a playbook at Baylor. And a lot of guys get away with great success with their athletic ability until they get to the pros, and everybody else has athletic ability. Look, RG3 was great in college. He deserved to win the Heisman Trophy at Baylor. And he was great his rookie year. He was tremendous till he decided he didn't want to play that way anymore. And he and his dad went, and I know this happened because I heard Rex Grossman say he was there when it happened, when Griffin went to the coaching staff and said, these are the 10 plays I'm not going to run anymore. He and his dad decided that. This guy's a piece of work. And I don't know, ESPN at some point may have to have a conversation with him and say, you have no credibility here. Nobody believes this nonsense. And you're saying on one hand that you can play and everybody's calling you with interest to play. On the other hand, you're saying you're retired. Which is it, Robert? And really, this revisionist history on what happened. Not that Jay Gruden was a good coach. He wasn't. But I believe that there is some integrity there. And I don't believe that someone who had spent as much time as he had around football, playing it and then coaching it as long as he did, he was an assistant for a long time, that he would go to a quarterback, especially this one, Mr. Blabbermouth, and say, go throw your teammates under the bus. All right, let me hit some quick preview here for other games as we get to the Ravens preview at 10:30. Mike Tirico is doing the game that's going to take place in Detroit between Tampa and the Lions. And, it's interesting how they shuffle everything to make sure everybody gets a fair shot at prime time, because NBC, you think of them as the night game, right? They have the Sunday night football, and they've been doing like the Saturday night playoff game. But this week, NBC gets the afternoon game at 3 o'clock, and the evening game is at 6:30 on CBS, the Bills and the Chiefs on Sunday, and then the Saturday night game is on Fox with the Texans and Ravens on ABC and ESPN tomorrow. This is Tirico on the game, and Dan Campbell, the misunderstood Dan Campbell, who I was clearly wrong about when he had his news conference and was introduced and talked about biting kneecaps. Tirico knows him, has spent some time with him away from football, and has come to this conclusion.
He's a smart guy. He's not a meathead. He's not a 3 yards and bite your kneecaps and all the stuff that we talk about with him. He's a really smart guy. And I think, Rich, as you're looking at these 7, 8, whatever it is, openings for head coaches, what do we talk about a lot? Not coordinators and what's your game plan, what kind of program you're going to bring in. We're talking about leaders of men. We're talking about guys who can lead an organization with a clear vision and focus. And I can't think of anybody who defines that better than Dan Campbell. And it's an all-the-time definition from him when it comes to that. So that's why I'm very pro Dan Campbell for the short term, what he's done, and the long term going forward.
And then again, Mayfield is coming in. This is a team that just eliminated the Eagles, and they did it with relative ease, despite having, obviously some holes. So coming in here, I don't know if you've had a chance to chat with the Buccaneers yet, what your 2 cents are about the NFC South champs to take on the NFC North champs here. Mike.
We will over the next day. I was just watching them this morning. They're watching back the Lions-Bucks game from Week 6 in Tampa that the Lions won 20-6. I think it's a much improved Tampa team from then. I really love the way Mayfield is playing. The offensive line has come together. It's a movement on that line coming into the season, and I think they've played better as the year has gone on. Vita Vea had a good game in the playoffs against Philadelphia, and that back end has had some injuries, and now everybody's healthy. And it's given Todd Bowles multiple players to play in different roles in different places. So I really like what this team has, especially Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. You go to those guys on a regular basis, and the Lions have struggled over the last 4 games. Justin Jefferson twice, CeeDee Lamb in the Saturday night game in Arlington. And then last week, Puka Nacua had a rookie record playoff game for receiving yards. So I think this will be a pretty close game. It'll be a tough game. And I think the team that runs the ball better and dictates what they can do in the pass game and controls the clock, like most playoff games, probably the team that'll walk away, go into the NFC Championship game, which just sounds crazy around Detroit and Tampa Bay, right? Two longtime downtrodden franchises, 2 teams that have become a home for number 1 overall quarterbacks who didn't make it with their teams. And now somebody's going to be a win away from the Super Bowl. Kind of cool story.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those teams, one of those forgotten quarterbacks, those scrap heap quarterbacks is going to be playing for the NFC Championship, and there's a possibility that Jared Goff will have a 3rd home game. Now it's going to take a big upset by Green Bay at San Francisco. I don't think they can necessarily do that, but if that happens, then you got Lions playing at home, and you heard Peter King last hour played that the noise level, and he was there for that playoff game last week in Detroit. He said it's like standing on a runway and having a 747 land right next to you. It's that loud, and it's going to be wild tomorrow afternoon when that game is played, and then or Sunday, I should say, and then the wrap-up game. That looks like the best game of the weekend, Chiefs and the Bills, and we're going to find out. I don't know why it's so dramatic to talk about Patrick Mahomes having to play a road playoff game. It may have been beneficial for him to play at home. It wasn't the first time when Tom Brady came in with the Patriots and took it down the field in overtime and beat them. Maybe it was helpful. Maybe it's been helpful. But I think, in Buffalo, he'll be able to certainly compete and I think win the game. The Bills are favored by 2.5 in that game. The others are kind of lopsided. Lions by 6, and then the 2 games tomorrow, both 9.5 for the home team. And the home teams could wind up playing in the Super Bowl. We'll see. Ravens and the 49ers, both with byes, having had the best record in the league. One other quick thing before we get to a Ravens preview, and this goes to my idea of just doing away with eligibility. If you want to play college football, play as long as you want. Miami tight end Cam McCormick is coming back for his 9th year of college football. Began his career at Oregon in 2016. he missed. It's not funny, but it's just he had injuries, so he missed parts of 4 seasons. Had the redshirt year, the COVID year of 2020, and went to different schools. Was originally a 3-star prospect out of Bend, Oregon, part of the 2016 class. Listen to these names: Justin Herbert, Nick Bosa, Ed Oliver, Rashawn Gary, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts already been in a Super Bowl. These were all in his recruiting class. Redshirted as a true freshman 2016, played 13 games as a reserve in 2017. Then came the injuries, broken leg in 2018, followed by complications that cost him 2019 and 20, followed by a foot injury 2 weeks into the 2021 season, was granted a 6th year of eligibility. He got his 6th year in 2019. Had another one added in 2020. 2022, finally able to play a full season. Appeared in 13 games, making 6 starts for Miami. And they gave him a 9th-year waiver approved by the ACC. I don't understand. Talia Tagovailoa, because he appeared in 1 extra game when he was at Alabama. The limit is 4, and he made like a ceremonial appearance in 5. They wouldn't give it to him. But this guy's getting 9 years. 9 years! I mean, you're talking about freshmen who he's going to be playing with who were, what, like the 4th grade or something like that? Amazing. 4th grade when he started playing college football. You know, Tom Brady had some teammates, who were born after he started playing. But anyway, that's remarkable.